The year is 879. Northern Rus stands frozen in anticipation. The dying Rurik, founder of the dynasty, leaves behind not just the underage Igor, but a dangerous power vacuum. In a world where the right to exist is dictated solely by the sharpness of an axe, an infant on the throne signifies a death sentence. It seemed that the proto-state, created with such immense difficulty, was at risk of crumbling into petty fiefdoms and vanishing into internecine strife, repeating the fate of the first, now forgotten, Rus Khaganate. But history had other plans. A man steps onto the proscenium whose name, by right of birth, should never have sounded in the chronicles on equal footing with monarchs. Deprived of princely blood, he was considered merely a caretaker, obliged only to preserve the throne for the legitimate heir. However, it was this guardian who achieved what even Rurik himself could not. Before you lies the paradox of Oleg the Prophet, a shadow that became the true architect of the ancient Rus state. If Rurik laid the foundation in the frozen mud of Ladoga, his vassal transformed scattered tribes into a monolithic force stretching from the Varangian cliffs to the golden domes of Byzantium. Today, we will uncover the anatomy of the most successful coup d'etat in the early history of Rus. We will understand how cunning and masquerade allowed the Varangians to seize Kiev, the mother of Rus cities, without a prolonged siege. We will assess the true significance of the shield on the gates of Tsargrad. Was it the gesture of a victorious savage or a subtle juridical act, forcing the Second Rome to recognize the Northerners as equal partners? We will read closely into the lines of the Treaty of 9/11, the first document of ancient Rus diplomacy, where Scandinavian names are heard for the first time, speaking on behalf of a unified kin of Rus. Finally, we will attempt to unravel the mystery of the death of Oleg the Prophet. Was his death from a snakebite a fatal accident, or does a beautiful legend conceal the finale of a struggle between the old pagan priests and the new princely will? This is a story about how the crown is not always inherited by right of blood. Sometimes it is forged from luck, steel, and absolute ruthlessness. Rurik remained a ghost of the north. Oleg became the sovereign master of the south. The longships are launched. The route from the Varangians to the Greeks awaits its conquerors. The year is 882. Rurikovo Gorodishche, northern Rus, hemmed in by ice and impenetrable forests, was approaching a turning point. Oleg, having assumed power over the lands at the headwaters of the Volkhov, collided with the harsh truth of trade in that era. Valuable northern furs were piling up in warehouses, but the markets for selling them remained inaccessible. The Volga route, which had brought Arab silver for years, was drying up due to turmoil within the caliphate. The commander looked at these lands not as a barbarian hungering for loot, but as a wise strategist assessing the balance of power. He understood to remain in the northern forests meant to slowly fade away in isolation. The path to prosperity lay to the south, where the Dnieper flows into the sea, opening the road to the treasures of Byzantium. However, between Lake Ilmen and the Black Sea stretched vast expanses occupied by scattered tribes and rivals. Such a transition required not just a war band, it required a fully fledged army. The chronicle lists the composition of the force gathered for the campaign: Varangians, Chuds, Slovenes, Meria, Ves, and Krivichs. Behind this list lies a fundamental shift in politics. For the first time, a Scandinavian ruler does not limit himself to hiring locals merely as oarsmen. he rallies Finnish and Slavic tribes under a common banner. Before us is not just another gang of Vikings looking for winter quarters, but the nascent mechanism of a great war. A polyglot crowd was transformed into a unified force, soldered together by discipline and the dream of wealth at the end of a long journey. The caravan of ships casts off. Hundreds of long ships, blackening the surface of the water, surge down the Dnieper. This movement resembles not so much an ordinary raid as the migration of a large predator expanding its habitat. The first to fall under the blow of this armada was Smolensk, the key city of the Krieviches. The capture happened swiftly, but the prince's subsequent actions break the customary northern pattern. An ordinary raider would have put the city to the torch, taken slaves, and vanished. Oleg acts differently. He leaves a garrison in Smolensk, seating his own men there. In this decision lies the entire essence of his strategy. Instead of pillaging territories, he engages in their subjugation. The commander creates strongholds, turning wild space into controlled lands. Smolensk loses its status of a tribal capital and becomes a fortress of a future power. Next, Lyubech submits, the northern gates of southern Rus. The scenario is unchanged: capture, submission, garrison. The ruler lays the foundation of a state, ensuring the security of his rear. He takes under his control the entire logistics of the north and south. Imagine the scale of this picture. A gigantic river serpent glides along the artery of the Dnieper, swallowing settlement after settlement. In the very center of this procession, on the flagship longship, is not only Oleg, beside him is little Igor. For the prince, this child is not a burden, but a key political instrument, living proof of the rights to power, transforming a usurper into the guardian of a dynasty. By the middle of 882, the armada reaches the borders of the Kiev domains. The commander foresees, ahead lies the most difficult trial. Kiev is not merely a wooden stockade. It is a powerful hub on high hills, held by the experienced Varangians, Askold and Deer. They have loyal men, walls, and the support of the townspeople. A frontal assault threatens to turn into a catastrophe, capable of bleeding the army before the great rain even begins. A siege could drag on, allowing enemies to gather forces. Then the prophetic prince decides to change methods. He hides his sword in his scabbard and relies on cunning. He understands, to secure this city, one must leave the role of warlord and become an actor. The caravan of ships slows its pace. The warriors receive a strange order: conceal weapons and lie low in the bottom of the boats. Oleg prepares to stage a performance that will go down in history as an example of unsurpassed treachery. Summer of 882, the tract of Ugorskoye at the foot of the Kiev hills. It is not combat drakkars that moor to the shore, but heavily laden merchant boats. There are no shields on the decks, no helmets gleaming in the sun. The oarsmen lazily dry their oars. For the sentries on the walls of Kiev, this is an ordinary trade caravan traveling from Novgorod to Byzantium. Oleg the Prophet plays a gambit. The prince understands. Askold and Deer are experienced warriors. If they bar the gates, the siege will drag on for years. Therefore, he strikes not at the walls, but at human greed and curiosity. A messenger delivers a brief message to the city. "We are merchants, going to the Greeks from Oleg and the princely heir Igor. Come out to us, to your kinsmen." Imagine this scene through the eyes of Askold and Deer. They are the masters of the Dnieper, whose names are known to Byzantine chroniclers. who is this northern guest to them? Just another trader from whom they can extract a toll, or from whom they can profitably buy up furs before they appear in the markets of Constantinople. The rulers of Kiev commit a fatal error. They descend to the boats without a guard, in ceremonial robes, expecting negotiations and a feast. The princes go to meet their countrymen. Instead, they walk into their own execution. As soon as the rulers step on board, the trap snaps shut. Warriors, hidden under mats and canvas, instantly bare their steel. Askold and Deir are surrounded, but Oleg delays the order. He needs not just the corpse of an enemy, but a political spectacle that legitimizes the seizure of power in the eyes of the warband. Oleg lifts little Igor into his arms. In the silence rings the verdict recorded by the chronicler. "You are not princes, nor of princely stock, but I am of princely stock, and this is the son of Rurik." In these words lies the key to understanding the era. Oleg does not accuse his opponents of tyranny. The strike hits the most vulnerable spot, the right of blood. In the early Middle Ages, power draws its strength not from merit, but from lineage. Askold and Deir are, to him, merely boyars who have forgotten their place. The swords descend. Bodies fall onto the Dnieper sand. The coup is complete. Kiev, the mother of Rus cities, has fallen without a single arrow fired from a bow. According to the chronicle tradition, the entire operation took less than an hour. Before us is a triumph of 9th century special forces, cruel, cynical, but absolutely effective. Oleg enters the city. Now in his hands is the key point of Eastern Europe. He has united the fur-rich north with the south, which has become the breadbasket and the gateway to the civilized world. The famous phrase rings out, "Let this be the mother of Rus cities." Behind this poetic image hides a direct calque from the Greek metropolis. The prophet did not just capture a fortress, he transferred the capital and laid the foundation of an empire. But the prince's ambitions are not limited to Slavic forests. Gazing south to where the waters of the Dnieper vanish over the horizon, he sees his next target. A target before which the greatest power of the world will shudder. Oleg has secured resources and an army. Now Rus needs recognition, a status that forces neighbors to respect it as an equal player. And such a mandate in those times was issued in only one place, in Constantinople. The prince begins preparations for a legendary campaign. He intends to do what no one has managed before, to force the Second Rome to pay tribute to barbarians. The year is 907, the Bosphorus. The culmination of the great expansion begins. Oleg has brought to the walls of Tsargrad not a scattered band of robbers, but a full-fledged army. The chronicle mentions a staggering number, 2,000 ships. Even if we reduce the figure tenfold, Byzantine chroniclers are observing an armada that literally erases the horizon line. Constantinople holds the status of the most protected bastion in the world. Its engineers have perfected defensive lines for decades. They employ a proven tactic, blocking the Golden Horn Bay with a massive chain, locking the barbarians in the outer roadstead under a hail of stones and streams of Greek fire. Emperor Leo VI the Wise has no doubt the northerners, like their predecessors, will limit themselves to ravaging the suburbs and will soon retreat. However, the prince crosses out the usual script of war. The moment arrives that has become legendary. and Oleg commanded his warriors to make wheels and place the ships upon them. Scholars argue, was this a real engineering solution, placing vessels on rollers for portage, which was customary for the Rus on the Dnieper? Or is this a description of the incredible mobility of the landing force, which transported its light monoxylus, maneuverable dugouts hewn from whole tree trunks overland to bypass the barriers? Imagine these shuttles gliding over the grass on wooden platforms. For the Byzantines frozen on the walls, the details are unimportant. They are witnessing a nightmare come to life. The enemy fleet is advancing over land, catching the wind with its sails. The psychological blow is overwhelming. This is not just an assault, it is a magical act. The megalopolis, which withstood the onslaught of Arabs and Avars, surrenders before the audacity of the northerners. The defeated bring out refreshments for the embassy, but the leader rejects the goblets. The wine is laced with poison. Such foresight definitively cements the name, the Prophet, to him. In the minds of contemporaries, this implies a direct connection with higher powers. Emperors realize the chieftain cannot be eliminated by trickery. They will have to negotiate with him as an equal. In conclusion, the prince performs an act that has passed into eternity. He fastens his shield to the gates of Tsargrad. Traditionally, we perceive this step as a triumphant, "I conquered this city." However, the legal culture of the early Middle Ages reveals a different meaning. In northern traditions, placing a shield on the gates symbolized patronage and protection. Oleg does not turn the Byzantines into slaves. He proclaims, "Now you are under my protectorate. I provide security, and for this you pay." Before us is not a display of vandalism, but the establishment of a new geopolitical order. The commander dictates his will to a superpower, turning the empire into a resource for the development of a young Rus. September 9, 911, Constantinople. The roar of battle has subsided, but true victory is born not on swords, but under the scribe's quill. Oleg realizes gold taken by force melts quickly. The prince requires a reliable system and an immutable law. On this day, a document is born that has been preserved in the chronicles to our times. The Rus-Byzantine Treaty, the foundation of ancient Rus law and the oldest written act. Let us turn to the list of those who seal this union on behalf of the young state. The chronicler records the names of the first diplomats. We of the Rus kin, Karla, Inigeld, Farlaf, and 12 other men. Think about these sounds. Karla, Injald, Farlof. The Scandinavian origin of the elite is obvious. There is not a single Slavic name here. However, a crucial metamorphosis is taking place. These Swedes and Norwegians refuse the title of Varangians. They officially proclaim to the emperors, "We are of the Rus kin." Oleg has launched a process of mental rebirth. The Varangian upper crust is gradually dissolving into the subject lands, forming a new political nation. Former mercenaries are transforming into state builders. The terms achieved look unprecedented. Before us is not the capitulation of a vassal, but an equal agreement between two great powers. Key points of the treaty. Duty-free trade. Rus gains the right of duty-free access to the markets of the empire. This is the economic breakthrough of the 10th century, opening the way of Byzantine silk and gold to the north. Social provision. Constantinople undertakes to support Rus merchants for half a year, providing food, from bread and wine to meat and vegetables. Cultural status. A separate line records, and let them be given baths as much as they want. The right to use imperial baths is not just a question of hygiene, but a recognition of Rus as a civilized partner and a sign of the highest prestige. Fleet supply. Upon departure, the Greeks supply the guests with sails, anchors, and ropes. Of particular importance is the criminal block. The treaty equalizes Rus law with Byzantine law. If a Rus kills a Greek, or vice versa, justice will be served according to strict norms, not by whim. This act definitively legitimizes Rus as a full-fledged subject of world politics. Oleg the Prophet has ascended to a summit Rurik only dreamed of. He forced the heirs of Rome to repair his ships and feed his war band. It seemed the prince had outplayed fate itself, his Kiev rivals, the Byzantine Tsars, and the logic of eternal war. In this moment, he feels himself equal to the gods. But the pagan world lives by the laws of balance. He who ascends too high inevitably attracts the strike of doom. Death is already lurking nearby. Not in the goblet of poison which Oleg so perceptively rejected, but in a place where he feels invulnerable, inside the skull of an old comrade of arms. Autumn of 912. Prince Oleg has reached the zenith of his power. Byzantium pays tribute. Trade routes are under control. Northern and southern tribes are welded together by an iron will. It seems earthly power has completely submitted to this man. He deceived Askold's guard, outwitted the Byzantine Greeks, and did not touch the cup of poison. The ruler has grown accustomed to considering himself the master of circumstances. However, in the pagan world, different laws operate. The higher a hero flies, the more closely doom watches him. The time has come for an ancient prophecy which Oleg had tried to bypass for years. The Magi had predicted, "You will accept death from your horse." For a northern konung, a steed is more than a means of transport. It is a combat companion, part of a warrior's soul. But Oleg remains a pragmatist. Instead of sacrificing the animal to save himself, he acts rationally. He simply eliminates the source of risk. The horse is led away to distant pastures. The order is severe: feed and care for him, but never let him near the prince. Years passed. The loud campaigns quieted down. During a feast, Oleg remembers the old prediction and throws a question to the groom. "Where is my faithful horse?" The answer sounds like a funeral toll. He has died. In this moment, Oleg feels absolute triumph. Reason has defeated mysticism, and will has defeated destiny. Oleg laughs in the face of the soothsayers. The Magi lie. The horse is dead, and I am alive. It is not enough for the prince to hear the news. He needs to see the finale of his enemy, to obtain physical proof of his triumph over fate. He rides to the place where the remains of his old friend lie bleaching. A desolate hill. The wind stirs the dry grass. Oleg dismounts and approaches the bones. The prince's boot tramples the horse's skull. Is it from this skull that I am to accept my death? At that very instant, the black ribbon of a viper glides from the eye socket. A lightning-fast bite. The death of Oleg the Prophet is one of the most poetic and controversial scenes in ancient Rus history. Modern historians see here a wandering literary trope, This legend almost literally repeats the Scandinavian saga of Odd the Arrow. There too, the hero is predicted to die, tries to cheat fate, but in the end, dies from snake venom in his native lands. What does this mean for us? Perhaps the chronicler, lacking precise data, used an epic to lend grandeur to the ruler's passing. Or perhaps life itself played out a drama according to the canons of northern sagas. But the symbolism is deeper than any text. Oleg bore the nickname the Prophet, that is, the knowing one, close to sacred secrets. However, he attempted to outwit the gods, placing calculation above providence, and the snake, an ancient symbol of chthonic forces, punished him for his pride. He fell not in battle and not by the sword. He perished when he believed in his own invulnerability.
The year is 912. Kiev. Smoke from funeral pyres rises above the Dnieper. The era of Oleg the Prophet has ended. The chronicle reports that all the people wept for him with great weeping. Behind these words hides not the etiquette of the chronicler, but genuine fear. The people are saying goodbye not just to a ruler, but to the guarantor of stability. The leader who negotiated with the Greeks, pacified the tribes, and held fate itself in check, has vanished. Igor steps onto the proscenium. Look at him more closely. The prince is already over 30. He has spent his entire conscious life in a gilded cage, overshadowed by the giant figure of his guardian. For 3 decades he bore the title of Rurik's son, while real power and the keys to the treasury remained with the Regent. Now the heir is left one-on-one with an empire that he did not build. Historians often call Oleg the gatherer of lands, but this definition seems too soft. He acted as the architect of a system. Let us analyze his legacy. Logistics. The route from the Varangians to the Greeks works without interruption. The garrisons of Smolensk, Lyubech, and Kiev guarantee the security of transit. Economy. The mechanism of polludia, or tribute collection, is fine-tuned. Every winter the prince tours the lands, collecting rent according to custom, not by the right of the strong. Diplomacy. In Constantinople hangs not only a shield, a legal treaty is in effect there. Rus merchants live in the monastery of St. Mamas, receive provisions, and trade without duties. Oleg achieved the incredible. A Varangian usurper without Rurik's blood in his veins created the state known to us as the realm of the Rurikids. A paradox of history. The dynasty received its name from the founding father, but its might from a hired manager. Igor accepts power at the peak. The treasury is full, the borders are calm, Byzantium pays. It seems it is enough for the new ruler to maintain this ideal mechanism. But here lies a trap. The son of Rurik is not like Oleg. He lacks the nickname the Prophet, and that mystical luck which allowed cities to be taken without a fight. He lacks the cunning of a diplomat, but within him pulses a thirst for glory, suppressed by years of waiting. He strives to prove to the warband that he is a chieftain equal to his predecessor. He craves a personal war and his own shield on the gates of Tsargrad. However, Oleg's old guard looks at him skeptically. The veterans remember the triumph of 907. Will the eternal heir manage to repeat that success? Igor does not yet know that the attempt to copy Oleg's strategy will turn into a catastrophe. His war with Byzantium will turn into the nightmare of Greek fire. But the main question is, will Igor be able to preserve the fragile social contract built by his guardian? Or will breaking the rules lead him to a tragic finale, in the forests of the Drevlians.
The path from the icy winds of Ladoga to the sunny Bosphorus has been traversed. The ghost of Rurik found flesh in the achievements of Oleg. Cunning laid the foundation of statehood, and the word of a diplomat struck more precisely than a sword. The shield on the gates of Tsargrad is the triumph of this era, the moment when Northern Rus declared itself to the world. Oleg the Prophet departs into eternity undefeated, leaving behind not just cities, but an empire. But time is inexorable. Power has passed to Igor. Very soon you will see how greed destroys the strongest alliances. We will show the Dnieper becoming a river of fire, devouring the Rus fleet, and how a widow, having survived the brutal execution of her husband, burns down an entire city to erect the first tax code of Rus on the ashes. From Oleg the Creator to Igor the Destroyer, from masculine force to the steely will of Princess Olga, the saga of the Rurikids continues. Subscribe to see how personal revenge becomes the law.